This is Mudunragavan, and this video we are going to understand about the checks in K6 load testing tool. In other frameworks you might encounter like asset statements or validation points. In K6 we have the name called checks. However, it has some lighter difference when compared to the asset statements. Let's check into the checks. Basic understanding before going to the checks, we can understand like it's kind of validation to make sure some of the expected conditions are met in your K6 script. Basically, a check is a method where the first object will be your result object, because whenever you make some calls like with HTTP object, you will be getting the result object that can be passed as a first argument, and second one is the object where it has the list of key and values. In that again you will be having the key as the test description, which explains your checks in detail, or let's say in a very higher level, and the value will be your boolean callback function, which returns either true or false. If you want your test case to be passed, then you can return the true, which is the expected condition, you will mention in that way. If failing condition, it should be in the negative case, which can be the negative value or the false value. In the same line or the same kind of information can be repeated multiple times to have multiple test cases. So with that knowledge, we will go to the official documentation to understand further on this, and this is the official documentation about the checks from the K6. It almost remains the same, and some things like you can see some examples like the validating the status code, validating some kind of text in that body, or validating the body size. It's lots. However, here we need to understand, even if you are failing the checks when you run the K6 or it is getting failure, but it will not stop the execution. The first reason might be like it is not the functional testing, it will be the performance testing, but you will have the checks and you will come to know at the end whether your checks has been met or it has been failed. So that's a major difference when compared to the asset statement in other frameworks. So with the theoretical knowledge, we can go to the code and we will try to create some checks. Go to our very basic script which we used last time, and in order to use the checks you need to get that from your K6, and that's what we have done in the line number 2. Along with sleep, like last time, we are just importing the check as well. Let's create check and open. It's a method call, as you know. Now in that we are passing the first one will be the result object, which means that whenever you make the call you will be having the return object, and that will be saved into the res here, and I am passing that as the first argument. And second one will be the simple object. Again this object will be having the key and value. You know that the key will be the description, for example response is 200, and value will be your callback function, which will have the argument nothing but your result, and you can implement the boolean condition here. Let's see, r dot status should be equal to 200. The same way we can write multiple test cases, but as of now we will first execute only this test case and see the output. Save it, and probably we can format it and try to run the same. K6 run, and ours will be the script.js. Now here you can see the checks is in red, or sorry, it is in green, which means that it has passed checks, and you can see something, the checks value 100% it passed. Let's make some negative condition. Let's make it 201 and try to execute. So here you can see it is in red, that means that it is not expected the response. Oh, even we need to update the description so that we will have the clear understanding. Let's execute one more time to have the clear output. Here your check is to see the response is 201, but we are not getting that one because it is actually 200. So now let's have some more things. So let's say the body length greater than, let's see, 1500. Again we can use the same syntax, you don't need to repeat multiple times. However, rather than status, we will just change it to body length greater than 11500. That's what. Since we don't have next test case, we can ignore the comma, and that's all. That looks good, and it should be the bytes, because our messages, or let's say the description, should be very clear. When we see the report, it should be understandable. Let's execute one more time and see the output. So here you can see both got failed. Let me just make it here 200, and it should be greater than, sorry, it should be less than. However, you can experiment and find out which one will be the correct one, or from the requirement we can understand. So let's see the output here. You can see both got passed, and you know that let's say if I make some mistakes here in the first one, it will not stop the execution, still it will execute. Just to make sure it happens multiple times, let's make 3 iterations, so that in the first iteration itself it got failed. However, that failure will not stop your execution, it will try to execute 3 iterations. You can see the iteration is 3 as we said, and here you can see 3 times it got failed, which is the response is 201 expected check, and remaining thing got passed. So this confirms that even though the failure happens, the check files, the execution still continue to work. So when we complete, just try to see the green so that we can complete happily. Let's execute one more time and see the output. The checks are got passed. Okay, that's good. And we have seen what is check. Basically, in case of testing, that assert or checks will be more important, and we need to make these conditions very clear. And we have seen how to structure the checks and how to create the multiple test case inside your check. You don't need to repeat the check multiple times, rather you will repeat the test cases internally into the check. And you have seen the description was very important. Why? Because when we mention something wrong, that makes our understanding a different way. For example, here 201, but actually we are just asserting for 200. It should be matching to your condition, and the description should be brief and clear. So this way we have understood the checks in this video. So thanks for watching, and have a great